Welcome to the CondoVultures.com podcast with your host, Peter Zalewski, a Miami real estate broker, Wall Street consultant, and expert witness. This podcast is focused on identifying real estate buying opportunities in the South Florida condo market of Miami-Dade, Broward, and Palm Beach counties. The CondoVultures.com podcast is not authorized by the South Florida real estate industry and will most likely annoy many of the region's talking heads. This podcast will feature straight talk and salty language that could be offensive to some. Please remember that past investment success does not determine future gains, especially in South Florida's volatile condo market. For more information, please visit CondoVultures.com. Don't buy a South Florida condo, discounted or distressed, before taking a Condo Vultures correction tour. CondoVultures.com offers weekly bus and walking tours that focus on educating buyers on the how-tos of identifying discounted condos, analyzing the opportunities, and purchasing units. Every tour attendee receives a list of all condo projects in a particular market, a market assessment handout, and unmatched expert analysis. For more information on the condo correction tours, please visit condovultures.eventbrite.com.
This is Peter Zalewski of the Condo Vultures podcast. I hope you're enjoying the podcast. And I wanted to alert you that if you have a property that you're looking to sell in the Tri-County, South Florida area, I would encourage you to reach out to Jenny Cortez, a licensed real estate broker with cvrrealty.com. She's my partner. She's been in the business for north of 15 years. More importantly, she knows the market. She knows how to get a deal done. And she also realizes that it's more important to get a price that you can accept and sell the property rather than to hold firm on some price that's never going to be achieved and ultimately languish on the market. So if you're looking to do a deal that you want a skilled expert who can help you sell a property, reach out to Jenny Cortez at 305-865-5859, 305-865-5859, or visit her website, cvrrealty.com. Welcome to Miami Reporters Roundtable. I'm your host, Peter Zalewski from Condo Vultures. If you're tuning into this podcast, you are going to hear a conversation by current and former journalists talking about some of the biggest stories that have occurred within the last week. All the stories are related to the South Florida real estate market. I handpicked the articles, I sent them off to the journalists, and I asked them to sort of give them a read and give you, the audience, their take on what's really going on. There's a lot of hyperbole, a lot of fluff in the South Florida real estate market, and our goal is to try to cut through that fluff and bring straight talk to you, the audience, to help you in your decision-making, whether you are an investor, whether or not you're a realtor, a developer, maybe just a gadfly sitting on the side and you want to be able to chime in when you're at some cocktail party about what's really going on in the real estate markets. Let me introduce the three other Roundtable members that we have for this particular podcast. We have a gentleman who was a journalist for over 25 years, primarily in the state of Florida. Right now, he does public relations and marketing. He has his own firm. That's John Gruss. Name of his company is Gruss Communications. You can get him at grusspr.com. That's GRUSSPR.com. What's going on, Mr. Gruss?
Hey, Peter. Great to be on the No Fluff podcast.
No fluff is allowed here. John, you remember back in the day, they actually sold that white, I don't know what you condiment that some people would, it was like marshmallow that was somehow always liquid that people would put on their sandwiches. Do you remember that?
Yeah. I do remember. It was Fluffernutter or something like that.
Fluffernutter. Something like that. Something like that. Yeah, that was that was the, that was before Nutella. Definitely before Nutella. Who else do we have on the podcast? We have a woman who's been a journalist for over 25 years. Right now, she's a freelancer in the Miami area, spent a lot of time out on the West Coast where she worked at a variety of publications, including the LA Daily News. It's no one else but Donna Evans. If anybody wants to get a hold of Donna, they can get a hold of her on her Instagram because she's very modern, unlike some members of our roundtable. They can get her at Coco Parkland. And it's Donna Evans. What's going on, Donna?
Hey, Peter. Happy to be here.
We're so happy to have you. You always provide some great insight as to what's going on in downtown. You're sort of the downtown expert, if you will. And then who's our fourth member of the podcast? It's no one else but John Fakler. John was a journalist for over 20 years. He wrote about white collar crime. He wrote about business stories. He actually did restaurant reviews. He's also a New York Jets fan. We're on the brink of the NFL season. He is in Miami Dolphins territory, and he's a Jets fan, which is a big rival. So Mr. Fakler, he can take a little bit of roughing up, but he still keeps standing, and he's able to maintain his stiff upper lip. What's going on, Mr. Fakler?
I'm jacked to be on the program. I'm jacked for the new NFL season to begin. Great to be aboard.
Well, it's great to have you, Mr. Fakler. If anybody wants to get a hold of you, you're on Twitter. They can get you at JT Fakler, JT Fakler, Fakler. And for what it's worth, I bypassed Mr. Gruss. I didn't mention his Twitter account. You want to get a hold of him, it will be Jean Gruss, JeanGruss. So all that being said, let me go ahead and sort of lay out the rules of engagement. I mentioned I handpicked 6 stories. I sent them off to the journalists, asked them to discuss them. We're going to kick it around. We're going to sort of cut through some of the fluff that's out there. But I want to tell you, the audience, if you want to comment, you like what we're saying, you dislike what we're saying, if you want to send a comment to us, send it to Miami RRP. What does that stand for? It stands for Miami Reporters Roundtable Podcast. And remember, not AARP. We're not old enough, or at least I'm not, to be a member of AARP, but you can get us at Miami RRP, where we're going to go ahead and post this podcast. And again, before we get into the stories, let me throw out one little tidbit. The other tidbit is, much like Marvel is able to sell, gear, clothing, T-shirts, coffee cups, with each of their superheroes, we're doing the same thing here. So right now, if you want to buy any kind of gear with any of our superheroes, i.e. the journalists, we're going ahead and we're selling it over on a website. If you want to check that out, very easy to get to. It's condovultures.creator-spring.com. Let me spell that for you. Condo Vultures, I don't need to spell, .creator, CREATOR, hyphen, that line in the middle, spring, like I can't wait for spring.com. Donna, I don't know if you know this, but Mr. Fakler was the first superhero that we began selling merchandise on. You can get flip-flops with him on it. You can get a shower curtain. So the first thing in the morning, you see his big picture on the side of the shower curtain. You can get T-shirts, you get a coffee mug, any and all of that. And Donna,
Throw
if you agree, we're
pillows.
going to actually, it's that throw pillows, exactly. So Donna, we'll discuss it afterwards. But if you agree, we'd love to be able to sell some of the merchandise with your screenshot from our podcast on it. So it's something we can discuss.
Okay.
I'm modeling the shirt, Peter. One of the shirts.
You are modeling the shirt, and that's why I brought it up. Take a gander at that shirt. If you're listening to this podcast on an audio format, you're going to have to go to YouTube, where you can actually check out this podcast, or you can go to Spotify, where there's going to be video associated with it. So Mr. Fakler is wearing one of the Miami Reporters Roundtable's podcast shirts, but you can also get one of any of our superheroes that we have participating in this podcast. So any of you have any questions so far about the how do you buy your gear? Remember, condovultures.creator-spring.com. In terms of the proceeds that we generate, it's roughly nothing. We had to keep it very cheap so it would be affordable. So any money that we were able to generate, we're going to put it towards all these journalists who are basically scrambling to get by, because it is a work of love rather than a work of money. Would you guys agree?
Yes.
Yes.
Fantastic. One of the changes we made here in season 4 is we're no longer breaking up the podcast to go to various ads. What we're doing is we're going to basically have one sponsor. Who is the sponsor? Let me introduce it. It's no one else but myself. It's Condo Vultures Realty. Condo Vultures Realty. We do brokerage services. We do consulting, anything and everything related to condos in the Tri-County, South Florida area of Miami-Dade, Broward, Palm Beach counties. If you have questions, you're looking for a broker to help you, reach out to my firm. You can get it at condovulturesrealty.com, condovulturesrealty.com. So that being said, let's go ahead and we're going to get into our stories. Mr. Fakler, we're going to start off with you with story number 1. I'm going to read you the headline. I'll read you the first couple graphs, and I'm going to ask you to comment. This is an article that's coming out of India, of all places. It's a sports publication out of India, but it's actually based on some reporting done in Miami. I don't like to use the same source too many times, so I went with this group. I checked out all of the details, and everything seemed to be on the up and up. But it's kind of a feel-good story. But we also want to go to you because you are a resident soccer or football expert. You remember Vice City Supporters Club? You went out to a match. You had a very difficult time wandering around. You didn't wear the right gear. They threw you out of the Supporters Club section. So you've shared some of your stories thus far. So we figured we'd go to you with this one. So name of the publication is called Sportskeeda. And basically it is a sporting website, but they have a lot of information related to Miami real estate for this particular story. So let me go ahead. I'll read you the headline for a couple graphs, and then you take it from there. Headline: Sergio Busquets and wife Elena Galera buy $8.7 million waterfront home with 7 bedrooms in South Florida. Will I read the first couple graphs, Mr. Fakler, then I want you to comment? Inter Miami midfielder Sergio Busquets has reportedly purchased an $8.7 million waterfront home with wife Alina Guerra in South Florida. The property contains 7 bedrooms and 6.5 bathrooms, among other amenities. The defensive midfielder's property spreads over 7,100 square feet area and was purchased from Renovation 7 LLC. Beth Gunnold, who works for the interior remodeling company, stated that this sale was a record in the Sea Ranch Lakes area of Broward County. It looks as though the former Barcelona man is settling in comfortably after completing his move to USA from Spain. He joined former Barcelona teammates Lionel Messi and Jordi Alba at Inter Miami. So, Mr. Fakler, my question to you is, Sergio Busquets is a world-renowned soccer football player. Yeah, he now has decided to come and play for Inter Miami. He's here because Lionel Messi is here, as well as Jordi Alba. They just recently won the first ever Legions Cup award. And Sergio, who is from Spain, he opts to buy in Broward County, which tends to be a little different feel than what you're going to find in Miami-Dade County. Mr. Fakler, you lived in Broward County for quite some time. Broward County is actually where Fort Lauderdale is located. Could you sort of walk us through as to why Mr. Busquets would opt for Broward County versus Dade County? Does it all have to do with the fact that Inter Miami is playing in Fort Lauderdale for the foreseeable future until its new arena called Freedoms Park is going to open in roughly 2025? Or do you think there's some sort of reason that you, as a former Browardite, can sort of justify why he opted for Broward versus Dade?
Well, it's perceived as a more family-friendly county. It's a little bit slower pace, really good schools. Not that, Miami-Dade doesn't have them, but it's a little slower pace of life for sure. And what I don't understand, those, and you mentioned it in your lead-in, is why he would buy property that's 5 miles away from the Fort Lauderdale Stadium, knowing that in the near future, there's going to be a new stadium built in Miami. I didn't quite understand that, why he would do that. Now, as far as, demographics too, he's Messi's age. So he's got a wife, he's got a family. I could see, settling down, but, why, if he's going to be here long term, why would he buy near the stadium if the stadium is going to be in Miami? And so it's quite a commute. So I don't know if you had any thoughts on that.
Well, Mr. Fakler, since you're our resident Browardite, former Browardite, right now you're living in Miami, but you lived in Broward for most of your time in Miami. You got here, in the late 80s? Well, as somebody who now lives in Miami, you used to live in Broward, what kind of adjustments or what kind of changes have you had to deal with as someone who speaks more English than Spanish, where Mr. Busquets speaks more Spanish than English?
Well, again, there's a good example. I mean, it's just about everywhere you go here, it's Spanish first and English second. Broward is the flip side. Broward is everybody speak English and very few people speak Spanish. So, I believe he's played in Spain for almost 20 years. So obviously Spanish is his first language. So again, another curiosity to me, why he would pick Broward opposed to Miami-Dade.
All right. Any other comments you might want to make about Inter Miami, which has the worst record in the league they play at in the United States and Canada, called the MLS? They just won the first ever Leagues Cup, which was a tournament between 47 teams in Canada, the United States, and Mexico. And they're still in last place for the regular season. But this was a 1-month tournament, and somehow they beat everybody and anyone, including teams from Liga MX. Any thoughts about that as our soccer
star? It was real exciting to watch that final. In full disclosure, Peter and I watched it together. And it was really just outrageously fun. It's a fun experience. They won this cup. There's been a lot of clips on YouTube and elsewhere of them celebrating. It's out. The fact that they won this and they won the cup, which is very important, is exciting. Here they were in last place in the MLS standings, and they go into this tournament and they wind up being the champions. So, very exciting. I'm definitely Messi mania has definitely. I'm part of it now, so I'm with it for the long haul.
And Donna, let me go to you real quick. You're also a member of Vice City,
Yes.
like myself and Mr. Fakler. We invited John. John was too busy. But that being said, Don, do you have any thoughts about Busquets buying in Broward and or your experience going to matches thus far and being in the supporters club?
I mean, I love being in the supporters club for sure. I live in downtown Miami, so for me to like get up there, it's always kind of a hassle. I try to, like there's train schedules and stuff, which like you can hop a train, but there's always some weirdness. Like the match is totally not going to be over by like 11 o'clock at night. I think that's the last train down to come back down south. But unless they have a bunch of kids, and I honestly don't like full disclosure, I have no idea if they have kids or if they're planning to have kids. But
Yes, they do. Yeah, they have children.
oh, okay, well then that explains it. Because I mean, Miami can just be like, I mean, Miami's awesome, but it's also very hectic and chaotic, and it's just far more family friendly up north.
Got it. And John, before we go into you with the story, you want to make any comments about Sergio Busquets, about Inter Miami, about Bape? Remember that Japanese fashion brand that announced that they were going to do it? They were going to do authentic Bape / Inter Miami gear. Any parting thoughts, Mr. Gruss?
Well, I mean, to be honest, I think people who've been here a long time make a bigger deal out of the, Broward and Dade, county lines than people like me who have been more recent arrivals. Like I don't really make a distinction between Miami-Dade and Broward and even Palm Beach. I mean, I'm up and down the coast all the time, and it's just one big megalopolis. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I mean, the county line really doesn't mean a whole lot to me. And I really don't feel like, there's that much of a difference between the two counties, but, I think historically there was, but I think more and more these days, I don't really think it matters. I mean, you're just part of one big giant, metro area.
Well, I will say one difference you will notice is in Broward County, they tend to they have their turn signals on. They don't always turn them off, but they always have the turn signals on, versus in Miami, you're probably not going to see a turn signal. You're probably more likely to get cut off at a higher speed in the car in Miami-Dade than you would in Broward. I mean, from my perspective, but what is that worth? So, Jean, we're going to go to you with story number two. It's coming out of CNBC. I'll read you the headline, read you the first couple points, and then I'll ask you to comment on the headline. Home sales fall again in July as supply drops to near quarter-century low. The key points from CNBC. The median price of a home sold in July was $406,700, an increase of 1.9% over July of 2022. Point number two, sales fell month to month in all regions except the West, where they gained 2.7%. Sales fell most in the Northeast, down 5.9%. And point number three, there were 1.1 million homes for sale at the end of July, 14.6% fewer than July 2022, and about half of the pre-COVID supply. John, what do you make of this? Last week we talked about home builder sentiment was going south because of rising interest rates, because of construction costs, the materials involved with construction, as well as labor challenges. And now we're finding that home sales actually fell year over year. Granted, 2022 might have been a record time. We were just coming out of the pandemic. A lot of people were still, they had cash in their pocket, whether they were working from home and they weren't spending as much, and or they're getting all those incentives and benefits that were distributed by the U.S. government. So what do you make of this latest story?
Well, I mean, this has been going on for the last 6 months. I mean, and South Florida, no exception. I mean, year over year, sales have been dropping, high single digit to low double digit percentage points. And, obviously limited supply, rising interest rates. The interesting thing to me is that the latest sales decline comes on the heels of contracts that are signed probably, May or June.
Yes.
And since in the last couple of weeks, I don't know if you've noticed, but mortgage rates have really spiked up, due in large part to the fact that the benchmark 10-year Treasury is up significantly. So, I mean, I think we're in for a whole lot more of the same, because at this point, the only people who can afford to buy a home now are people in the one percenters, and people who have cash. if you have cash, you don't have to deal with mortgages. So I think we're going to be in a really slow period. Now, what's I've been sort of thinking about now is month after month of sales declines. I'm wondering, what's going to happen with all these brokerages, these residential brokers. And my suspicion is that we're going to start seeing a lot of consolidation in the residential brokerage industry because they can't keep bleeding like this. I mean, we've already had some news of layoffs, in residential real estate, brokerage companies. I mean, I'm not quite sure like how many more months of this sort of downturn they can handle because there's there's nothing on the shelf. There's nothing to sell and people aren't buying and people aren't selling. So, I think we're going to see a shakeout in the residential brokerage industry. And I would anticipate 4 years end, we're going to see some of that here in South Florida.
And let me point out to the public, generally speaking, and there's no collusion in real estate, but generally speaking, when a listing broker tries to get your home and put it up for sale and put it in the multiple listing service, that database, generally speaking, it's about a 6% commission is what they're going to offer to the market. As times get tougher, it gets more competitive, they tend to reduce it, but that 6% will typically be 3 points to the sell side, 3 points to the buy side. Now let's let's say a typical house down here is what, $500,000, $700,000. So that gives you an idea how much the real estate commission will be. Now let's contrast that to the rental market. The rental market, it's typically a 10% commission, but that's based off of the gross annual rent. So somebody's paying $1,000 for a unit per month, 12 months in a year, you're looking at 12 grand, 10% of that is $1,200. And then you divide it by 2. So you can see there's a real big difference in terms of what kind of money you can make. So Jean, let me just read you this quote. I'd like to hear your comment, maybe some other members of the roundtable, their responses. The quote is, the housing market is at a pivotal point as we head in the fall, said Lisa Stuyvesant, chief economist at Bright MLS, noting higher mortgage rates in particular. The decision between renting and buying will tip in favor of renting for some consumers, particularly in markets where rents are falling and new apartments are coming online. What do you make of that, Mr. Gruss? Is it because of high insurance prices in the state of Florida? We've discussed it multiple times. High property taxes, because obviously the value of your home goes up. That means you're paying more in property taxes. Even if you're homesteaded in the state of Florida, you're able to limit the overall increase, as well as simply just the cost of maintenance as well with some of these buildings. Is it going to get to the point where it's better to rent than it is to own? Like I made that comment on WLRN, our National Public Radio Service program a couple weeks ago, and everybody on the panel laughed at me that it's always better to own than to rent. Are we at that tipping point, or am I out in la la land?
No, we've been past that tipping point. I mean, it's been better to rent for the last year or two, honestly. I mean, when you add in the taxes, HOA fees, insurance, look at what insurance is doing. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's just a no-brainer to rent right now. And there's a tsunami of apartments under construction now that they're going to flood the market. Thousands of units are coming online. And so that's going to depress rents. And to be honest, I mean, it's just a slam dunk to rent right now.
Donna, John, would either of you like to add to what Mr. Gruss has just said?
From your mouth to God's ears on the rental. Because I hope they need to start going down.
Donna, you own. What do you think? Are you going to defend the ownership, or are you going to go the way of Mr. Fakler?
Well, I mean, I definitely agree. And I think that if it were 2 years ago, I would probably be looking for an additional rental. But 2 years ago when I bought, it seemed like the right move. And I think I'm going to be okay. I think folks who are trying to sell now, I think if they bought like in the last 2 years, like while it was going up, I think they're going to be okay. But when I saw what mortgage rates are doing, it's dizzying. So
great way to put it, dizzying. Donna, we're going to go to you with story number 3. Let me read you the headline, read you the first couple graphs, and then ask you to comment. So here we go. This is coming from NBC6 South Florida. This is the TV affiliate down here in South Florida for NBC Network. Headline: the best places to live in the United States? Question mark. Florida makes the cut with 4 spots in the top 10. However,
Yep.
Livability announced the 2023's annual list for the best cities to live in the United States, and no, Miami's not one of them.
Miami. Nope.
Donna, I thought everybody wants to be in Miami. Lionel Messi is here. You have DJ Khaled. You have everybody coming to Miami. Everyone from New York, from California, the hedge fund people, the private equity people. Everybody wants to be in Miami. How are we now one of the top 100 cities in the United States? What do you make of that, Donna?
Oh, for God's sake. I have friends and family who won't even visit me because I live here. This city is not for everybody. It cracked me up when I saw that Miami, because, when Miami wasn't like one of the first words in the headline, I was like, oh, well, I guess, Miami didn't make it, and it didn't, which I thought was really funny.
Okay, so we got your initial reaction. Now let me read you the story so you just know who is actually in that list to compare it to Miami. So Livability announced their annual list of the top 100 cities to live in the U.S. today for 2023, and 4 local spots hits the chart. This list focuses on highlighting small and mid-sized cities that offer high quality of life, affordability, and various opportunities for individuals and families. It aims to showcase cities that are often overlooked in favor of larger metropolitan areas. So maybe that's the argument that can be made, but let me continue. Among the top 50, the list features St. Petersburg, Florida, Alafaya in Central Florida, and Fort Lauderdale. Orlando was number 92. The selection process involved evaluating nearly 100 data points and utilizing an algorithm that considers factors such as livability, economic opportunities, and the cost of living. It only considers destinations with populations between 75,000 and 500,000, which the city of Miami has, and emphasizes affordability, excluding those with a median home value of over $500,000. So maybe the over $500,000 is what threw us off the list. But Donna, let me ask you, you're somebody who lived out on the West Coast. You lived in the East Coast. You lived in Miami. Is St. Petersburg, Florida, is Fort Lauderdale, and is Orlando better than Miami? What say you?
St. Pete is really beautiful. I think the people there are incredibly kind. I think one of the things that said in the article was that it got an award it's in the Guinness Book of World Records for most consecutive sunny days. It was like 361 days of sun.
Wow.
It's a super inclusive city. Like they're very like, hey, come hang out with us, come join us. And it's very open-minded kind of place and very artsy. It's very, there's a lot of great art there. So, I mean, it's actually a place that people that I know, including myself, escape to when Miami just gets to be like too much. And you just have to like get out of it and just like go chill. It's very chill.
Donna, let me throw out one other tidbit that comes out of the article, and this is for the audience as well. It says, Miami didn't qualify to make the list. According to Redfin, Miami holds a median home value of $588,000. Miami's cost of living is 21% higher than the national average, according to a reference from PayScale Software. Livability topped Fort Lauderdale at number 47 on the list. The ultimate coastal paradise is what they called it. True or false, Donna? What do you think?
For all of that, or whether Fort Lauderdale is the ultimate coastal paradise?
Whether Fort Lauderdale is the ultimate coastal paradise.
I'm going to go with false on that. I don't. I'm just not a Broward gal. I don't know. I'm just not. Lauderdale is great, but I just ultimate coastal paradise. Come on, no. Who do they pull? Like no.
Mr. Fakler, you're a Browardite. You were there for 3 decades. You ventured down in the Miami-Dade County a couple of years back. What do you take of the slagging that Donna is giving to Fort Lauderdale?
Well, listen, it's very boring compared to Miami. I'm sorry. I mean, the shit show that Miami is sometimes is actually welcome for, it's a late night city. It's open all night. It's very, very equivalent to me to New York City, where I'm from. So, I'm much more comfortable in Miami-Dade than I was in Broward.
So the question is, why did you live in Broward so long?
I really can't answer that. Probably because it was very equivalent to the suburbs of New York, which is where I grew up. I lived in New York City, of course, for a certain period of time, but it just reminded me of the suburbs. So there was a comfort, a sort of a comfortable feeling living in Broward because it was very similar. And you had a lot of New Yorkers who lived there. as well, which you did see in Miami-Dade at one point, but then they all moved up to Broward. So, yeah, it's kind of weird.
See, and now this is a great transition for our next story. Mr. Fakler just talked about how Broward County has a suburban vibe. It's low density. There's a lot of, it's easier. You don't have the high density, the rat race of Miami. So this is a transition for story number 4, which we're going to go to Jean for. Jean, this story is coming out of the Miami Herald, creating quite an uproar in the development community and real estate community in South Florida. Miami Herald story, I'll read you the headline, first couple graphs, and then I want you to comment on it. Headline: a new law is supposed to boost affordable housing. South Florida cities are furious. First couple graphs: the Florida legislature was widely praised this year when it passed sweeping legislation designed to supercharge construction of affordable housing by directing hundreds of $millions in low-interest loans and big tax breaks to developers. But in the early days of implementation in South Florida, the Live Local Act, which is called, is running the significant roadblocks because of another less publicized feature of the law that went into effect July 1st. Provisions that override local zoning controls on building height and density. The idea is to allow developers to build big in exchange for setting aside apartments and mixed residential and commercial projects at lower rents for people who meet certain income criteria. The new law, touted as bold and comprehensive attempt to tackle Florida's crippling housing crisis, requires cities and counties to approve the projects without hearings where elected officials could seek public input and discuss and vote on the proposals, even if they dramatically violate existing height and density restrictions. Last graph, Mr. Gruss, then I'll ask you to comment. Critics question whether the state law really will help people struggling the most to afford soaring apartment rents and home sale prices that became South Florida's hallmark during the pandemic. Most controversially, the Live Local Act bars local authorities from enacting rent controls as Orange County voters did last year. Housing advocates had called for such controls to calm down the frantic Miami-Dade housing market. Mr. Gruss, basically what the law has said, and you're going to get into it, is you want affordable housing, we'll give it to you, but developers, if they give you affordable housing, they can reach for the stars in terms of the height, and nobody cares what the local planning and zoning board members think in each of these communities, whether it's Hollywood, it's Doral, or it's anywhere around the coast. What say you, Mr. Gruss? Is this good? Is it bad? And is Broward going to go the way of the dodo bird in terms of its suburban lifestyle?
Well, you may remember in the last season of the podcast, we talked about this. And,
we did.
And the thing that sparked all of this was that some municipalities like Orlando and St. Pete, by the way, were sort of going off the reservation and starting to enact rent controls. And the legislators, the Republican legislators up in Tallahassee went ballistic over that. They were like, no, that's not going to happen, because it was starting to spread. It started in Orlando, it spread to St. Pete, and then all these other communities were talking about imposing rent control. And the legislators freaked out and said, no way, this is not happening in Florida. So they got together and enacted this legislation, and that was certainly part of the legislation. But then what they did is they promised a buttload of money for affordable housing in exchange for doing away with rent controls, and gave developers basically carte blanche to develop, as much as they wanted, as long as they had this, certain amount set aside for affordable housing. So, I mean, one of the big problems to creating affordable housing is you've got a lot of NIMBYs in Florida, not in my backyard, people who don't want affordable housing. They may complain about that there's no affordable housing, but they don't want it in their backyard. So this basically circumvents the whole NIMBY crowd, and bypasses the zoning boards where things get bogged down, and the whole neighborhood gets up in arms, and basically projects don't happen. These affordable housing projects will never happen because of local opposition. So to bypass that, the legislature said, then we're just going to take it out of the municipality's hands. And so, you can't have affordable housing without allowing density. It's just as simple as that. And in urban areas where there's access to public transportation. And unfortunately, a lot of neighborhoods are going to be, their character is going to be altered. And I think you're already starting to see some of that happening. And, there's nothing municipalities can do. I mean, they can lobby their legislators to change the statute, but I mean, developers now have a green light, basically. And if you try to stop them, if municipalities try to stop them, they're going to get sued. Yeah, and they're gonna lose. I mean, so it's actually, it's interesting. The story says that everybody's been caught by surprise, but this was like extensively discussed last year.
Yes, it
I mean,
was.
there was quite a bit of reporting. There was a lot of back and forth. All these issues were out on the table, and now we're reading that people are shocked and surprised that this is happening. And I'm like, where were you? Like when all of this was going down, it's kind of surprising a little bit. And, I think these issues have been they were well hashed out in the press and everywhere else. And I'm a little bit surprised that, people are now coming and saying, well, we didn't realize this was going to happen, but
Donna,
it's happening.
Donna, let me ask you this question. You pride yourself on spending a lot of time in downtown. You walk, you take public transportation. You've seen a lot of changes. This sort of reminds me of what happened in a so-called Edgewater neighborhood of greater downtown Miami. We had a bunch of 2-story houses or multifamily, 2 units, 1 unit on the top floor, another unit on the first floor. Developers came in, they bought these houses for a shit ton, and that is a real estate term. They bought them for a shit ton. They assembled all these blocks and they put up 40 and 50-story towers. And today still, you'll see a couple little 2-story buildings next to a 50-story tower. Donna, do you think that what we've experienced in Edgewater over the course of the last 15 years or so, and I would define Edgewater as basically the MacArthur Causeway all the way up to the Julia Tuttle, it'd be somewhere in the ballpark of 14th Street up to about 36 on the east side of Biscayne Boulevard. Do you think that's really what state of Florida is looking at now based on the new legislation, where these little 2-story single-family home communities or multifamily home communities with a lot of character, like John mentioned, can basically just be steamrolled, and we're going to have a whole series of 30 and 40 and 50-story buildings?
I think it's going to keep happening. He made a really good point about the give and take of that. So with the green light for the developers, I mean, they're gonna want to, developers want to go high, and that is going to completely transform communities, but it's also going to be able to allow the more affordable housing projects that you absolutely have to have, because it is so completely not affordable and in a lot of South Florida right now, especially Miami. So it's give and take, and I think you're going to see it keep happening for sure. I mean, Wynwood's already. It's are you considering Wynwood to be just outside of Edgewater, or?
Yeah, it would just be outside of, it's just to the west of it, generally speaking. So Mr. Fakler, you got here in the 80s.
Yeah.
Let's say you're long in the tooth, but you've been here a while. You've seen a lot of stuff. How do you think this applies to South Beach, where you have all these 2-story buildings? Now, many are in historic, designated areas, but we all know how much we pay attention to history. At least the governmental leaders do pay attention to history down in South Florida. Mr. Fakler, could you see someplace like South Beach being totally changed, even though the city of Miami Beach is pro quality of life and anti high density, anti new construction?
Well, I don't know so much about South Beach. It still has that international flavor that's probably going to, visitors and tourists, and it's going to keep the pricing somewhat high. But
if you could bring 40% of a project earmarked for affordable housing, wouldn't that be an advantage?
Well, listen, affordable housing is the redheaded stepchild of South Florida real estate. Let's get past that. I got to tell you, in New York, the only way you could afford to live in Manhattan is to rent control. And I lived in a rent control apartment myself. That I subleased it. But that's, there was a certain amount of, give and take as far as that goes in New York. It's once again, not something, real estate developers wanted to talk about. There was a lot of legislation changing some of those rules. That might happen down here as well. But I just don't think affordable housing it's a non-starter here in South Florida. And I don't care if it's South Beach or anywhere else in the area, in my opinion.
Interesting. Okay. Story number 5. Donna, we're going to go to you with this story. This is, oh, wow, it's coming out of NBC6 again, South Florida. NBC6, South Florida. Let me go ahead and read you the headline, read you the first couple graphs. We were talking about the rising cost of living in South Florida. Remember, Miami wasn't one of the top 100 cities, but maybe it had to do with the fact that the median sales price was too high or whatever. But here is the headline. Here's the first couple graphs, and it has to do with condo associations and who is collecting the money, how are they spending the money, and is there any kind of shady business going on? So, headline, where is all the money going? In quotes, Sunrise condo residents furious over special assessment fees. Subhead, over the past year, residents have faced multiple assessments, paying hundreds of dollars from fixes to the elevators to overdue bills. First couple graphs, Don, and then I'll ask you to comment. First couple graphs, and there's some great video if anybody wants to look it up. We're going to put a link in the podcast of some people in the community getting a little bit feisty. Here we go. Seniors at a Sunrise community. Sunrise is in Broward County. It's a city in Broward County. Seniors at a Sunrise community were furious Wednesday after learning their homeowners association approved the special assessment fee despite overwhelming opposition. Sunrise Lakes Phase 2, a 55 and older community in the heart of Sunrise, is at a crossroads and in crisis. The HOA board held a special assessment meeting Wednesday before a packed crowd of residents who say they're feeling the financial strain. Where's all the money going? They mismanaged the books, resident Paul Rabin said. Where's all the money been going? We're not uncaring. We just don't have any choices anymore, said Pamela Kershed, and HOA board president. They didn't go for it for many years, and now the law says if you don't do it, you are going to have to take it away from you. So, Donna, before condo associations used to kick the can down the road, they didn't want to spend any extra money because it meant that the fees were going to go up. Then you had Champaign Tower South collapse, that disaster where close to 100 people died. There was $1 billion payout. Insurance prices have gone up tremendously in the state of Florida. The state legislature put in place some rules that now require condo associations to earmark money in reserves, as well as no longer be able to kick the can down the road. And what this is doing is this is really a sort of a religious moment in theory for many, because they're realizing everything that they have, it costs a hell of a lot more than it should have cost. And now some of these associations are trying to figure out what the hell exactly do we do with it. You live in a condo. You are probably going through the process. I'm just wondering if you could give us your, perspective about how your fees have changed, if they've changed, whether or not the money is properly spent, and whether or not, there's shenanigans possibly going on here, or is it possibly shenanigans widespread in South Florida, or is it simply an anomaly, at least the allegation? And by the way, for what it's worth, in doing some research and talking to some people, basically your condo fees that you pay, 20% is earmarked towards insurance, 10% is earmarked towards property taxes. So basically 1/3 of your overall fees are going to go for insurance as well as property taxes. So what say you, Donna?
I mean, I don't think you're going to have to dig too hard to find that there were probably shenanigans going on for a while. Special assessments are always hard, especially when, you as the homeowner, whether you're a new homeowner or you've been there for a while, and you just either, you hadn't been paying attention, or all of a sudden you're like, hey, all of these things are horribly wrong and have to be paid for. Now I think this is going to end up in litigation. And the thing is, it's such a tough spot because a lot of these seniors are on fixed incomes. And so if you're used to paying a certain amount of money every month, and now with these, special assessments to get things fixed that have to be fixed, like the roof, and, really big fixes like that, it could be big air conditioning fixes, like changing out whole units. That's a lot of money. And, these buildings can lose they can lose their insurance companies if the fixes aren't made. So, I think the real question is what do the books look like? Like, what is this decades of mismanagement? Like what, why is it all happening now? How did it get to be, to be this bad? I know we just got hit with a special assessment, and it's it's actually for faulty air conditioning. I would strongly encourage, these residents, or certainly relatives of residents, if the residents themselves, don't necessarily have the wherewithal or the ability or the time or whatever to really do the deep digging. I think this is all going to get litigated. I think it's going to go that way.
Jean, let me ask you before I go to Mr. Fakler for story number 6. Jean, if these people, and in this story, they're over 55 community, they have fixed incomes like Donna mentioned. If a special assessment is required now under the new legislation because as a result of the Champlain Tower South collapse, that disaster, what are these people to do? Are they simply going to try to sell? And if too many people sell, what is that going to do to pricing? What is that going to do to the ability to refinance? Can you sort of walk us through some of the pitfalls that communities such as this might be facing?
Yeah, I mean, look, fortunately, they may actually come out on top by selling. I mean, in this market, I mean, especially if they've owned the units for quite a while, I mean, they really have no option other than to sell, because if they don't pay their HOA fees, the HOA can place a lien on their property, and they can actually foreclose. I think they can foreclose. I think the HOA has the power to foreclose. I mean, HOAs, unfortunately, they're run by people who may not have, the skills to run one. At best, at worst, they're corrupt. And, in fact, I was talking to a friend of mine who lives in a building here in Brickell, and they actually don't have any reserves. And every repair that has to be done in the building is done via special assessment, because they don't trust the board. So they don't have any reserves. So
Wow.
nothing, there's no money to pay for anything. And anytime they want to do something like repave the parking lot or fix a gate or repair the pool or anything else, it all has to be done by special assessment, because nobody trusts anybody.
Wow.
And so, this is the state we're in. I mean, and HOAs are, unfortunately, they're a mess. And financially, I mean, this has been, pretty clear in all the investigations with the disaster with the Champlain Towers. I mean, most of these buildings are ancient. The residents have been there for a long time. A lot of them are retired on fixed income. I mean, they can't possibly pay for the repairs that need to be done to keep these buildings safe. And I mean, I just don't see another way out except by selling. But fortunately, they're in a seller's market. So, I mean, they should get out while they can.
Well said, John. Mr. Fakler, we're going to go to you. Story number 6. This is kind of an interesting one. I used to write about white collar crime when you weren't doing restaurant reviews. So let me go ahead and read you the headline, first couple graphs. Headline. Well, this is actually coming out of the real deal. Headline. Bay Harbor Island's longtime attorney pleads guilty in $7 million real estate fraud. Craig Sherman, 80, could face up to 40 years in prison. First couple graphs. The former town attorney for Bay Harbor Islands pleaded guilty to 2 counts of wire fraud after allegedly orchestrating a multi-million-dollar real estate scheme. Craig Sherman, town attorney for more than 40 years, admitted that he defrauded friends and clients through the scheme, which ran from 2013 to 2020. Sherman secured investments for real estate projects planned in Bay Harbor Islands. Anybody doesn't know where that is? It's on the barrier island. It's right north of Miami Beach and south of Sunny Isles Beach, and due west of Surfside and Bell Harbor. Sherman secured investments for real estate projects planned in Bay Harbor Islands, but instead of using the money for developments, he used the money for personal expenses and for his law firm, Boca Raton-based Sherman & Sherman. He also used the funds to pay for other investors' bad court filing show. He resigned in 2019 after lawsuits accused him of stealing nearly $5 million from investors who he had promised 10% annual returns on their investment. Miami Herald reported the fraud ended up totaling nearly $7 million, according to U.S. Attorney's Office for the Southern District of Florida. Mr. Fakler, what do you make of the fact that the town attorney for 40 years in this small little community where we used to have our office located, basically was running a real estate hustle?
Well, first off, I'd like to just shout out to Catherine Kalergis, who wrote the story. Catherine's one of our regular guest panelists. Just very detailed, excellent story. Listen, one of the things I took away from this right off the bat was very similar pyramid scheme that was run by Bernie Madoff. He promised investors a 10% return. Same thing here. The investors, he took this money from investors. He paid, he took care of his law firm. He took care of himself. But the investors in the end really got screwed here. And this guy, it's a very similar, matter of fact, the same age group as Madoff. I'm wondering if this type of scam, this type of pyramid scheme, these old timers just nailed this and just keep doing it over and over again.
But Mr. Fakler, let me push back on that. Okay, let me push back.
Yeah.
So in the story that Catherine wrote, it said that Sherman told investors that he was authorized to broker the sale of development rights in the town.
Yeah.
He promised investors in what turned out to be fake real estate developments that they would receive between 6 and 8% in annual interest for their loans. 6 to 8% is not a lot for an investor, especially when you're going like a private equity type of position, with principals to be returned when the projects were completed. He even told investors that the town of Bay Harbor Islands has imposed a building moratorium, which means you can't build anything else that affected the fake projects, according to the indictment. How are these so-called old timers that you're referring to, how are they to know if this is the town attorney telling them?
Yeah. Thanks for mentioning that, because I was just going to bring that up as far as once again, cut me off at the knees. But it's just reminiscent of other pyramid schemes that have happened. You remember the Miami boaster Rothstein, who got 50 years for a Ponzi scheme?
Scott Rothstein out of Los Olas. He had an office. He had a factoring company.
Okay. But like Sherman, he was also a law partner. So he was scamming his law clients. These were his legal clients, and wound up getting 50 years. One of the more notorious Ponzi schemes down here. Just seems like these Ponzi schemes keep creeping up from time to time. Maybe his wasn't real estate based, but you certainly see these. Catherine mentioned 2 other similar situations, 2 other frauds that went down recently. I don't have the information in front of me, but so she had a nice recap of all these wire fraud type cases that have happened down in South Florida, and just continues to happen.
Don, a quick question. If you can't trust a town attorney in terms of development rights, how do you have any confidence?
Trust no one. Trust yourself. That's it. No, that's horrifying. Yeah.
Interesting.
John, anything you want to add?
And Bay Harbor Islands it's like pretty fancy place, isn't it? I mean, this not the slums, man.
But I did want to add, this is interesting, Peter. You might remember this, because if you look at the time frame, 2013 to 2020, I remember you personally speaking about all these developments that are being proposed in the town. Do you recall? It was a hot button area in that time frame. So that was the first thing I thought of when I saw the story. I was like, wow, this is something that Peter was talking about in his programs, about these developments that are being coming down the pike, and they're all fake, turns out.
Well, I don't want to connect dots that shouldn't be connected, so I'm going to say this is separate. But so the former town attorney in Bay Harbor Islands is faced with this. And if you guys all remember, in season 3, we were talking about how the husband of the city attorney of Miami was being linked to some sort of investment type of plan where the husband was able to allegedly buy properties at a discount as part of a guardianship program, turn around and flip them within the same day or shortly after buying them. So, I'm just throwing it out there. I'm not making a connection, but, if you can't trust the town or the city attorney, who are you supposed to trust, especially if you're a real estate developer? Is sort of the question I want to, I want to just sort of put out there. It's rhetorical.
Yep.
So that being said, let's go ahead. We're going to end this podcast. Thank you, everybody, for listening, for following us. I want to thank John Gruss. John was a journalist for over 25 years. Right now, he has a public relations marketing firm called Gruss Communications. You can get him at grusspr.com, GRUSSPR.com. You can also get him on Twitter, where his handle is John Gruss, Jeangrus. John Gruss, Jeangrus. Also want to thank Donna Evans. Donna was a journalist for over 25 years. She's a freelancer right now here in Miami on the East Coast. She also worked out on the West Coast where she worked at various publications, including the Los Angeles Daily News. You want to get a hold of Donna? She's on Instagram. You can get her at Coco Parkland, COCOPARKLAND. Thank you, Donna, for joining us again in season 4. And I want to thank Mr. Fakler, John Fakler. John is a public relations and marketing consultant. He's also, for anybody watching it, he's wearing some of our garb, some of our gear, Miami Reporters Roundtable gear. If you want to check that out, I'll tell you how to get to that momentarily. But let me tell you how to get a hold of Mr. Fakler. You can send him a message on Twitter at JT Fakler, Fakler. And if you do want to buy any of our merchandise, if you will, we got t-shirts, we got shower curtains, we got welcome mats, we got throw rugs, we got coffee cups, not only of the various programs that we have, but also some of our superheroes. Our journalists are out there talking straight about the real estate market. Simply go to the website, condovultures.creator-spring.com, condovultures.creator-spring.com. How do you spell that? Well, Condo Vultures is not a spell. Creator, CREATOR, hyphen, the line in the middle, spring. Like, I can't wait for spring.com. So check that out. So until next time, I'm Peter Zalewski of the Miami Reporters Roundtable podcast. Thank you for tuning in. And don't forget to subscribe. Don't forget to like us. Help us move up in the rankings in terms of the podcast. And we will catch up with you soon. Ciao, ciao.
It's a simple formula, and it works. Buy low, sell high. We're Condo Vultures, and when it comes to your real estate, we help you buy low. At Condo Vultures, we represent the buyer, and now's the time to buy. Log on to condovultures.com for more information. condovultures.com. And remember, before you sell high, you have to buy low. Featured in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, 60 Minutes, and Time Magazine. Condo Vultures Realty, a licensed Florida real estate brokerage capitalizing on the condo correction since 2006.
This is Peter Zalewski of the Condo Vultures podcast. Before I started doing these podcasts, I was in the business of being a licensed real estate broker, a contributing columnist for the Miami Herald, as well as the Miami Real Deal, but also extra witness work in consulting. So if you are looking for an expert witness, or if you're looking for consulting services, a straight talk perspective as to what's going on in a particular marketplace, a building, or what happened previously, for whatever your situation is, whether you are an attorney, whether you are a institutional fund looking to invest, or whether you're a lender who's trying to come up with some sort of strategy and approach for your lending committee going forward, I just might be able to help you. To get a hold of me, please reach out to peter@condovultures.com. That's peter@condovultures.com, or give me a call to the office at 305-865-5859, 305-865-5859.